What does it mean to love another person? This is a profound question, and as soon as I ask it, I imagine that most of us think about romantic love. But really, I want to talk about ordinary love, the sort of love that I might have for anybody that isn't me. In a time where there's big debates going on about difficult issues like gender and sex and sexuality, where there's a lot of opinions that are strongly held, what does it mean to love a person who is not like you? He may hold very different views to you. He may disagree with you. What does it mean for you to love me if you disagree with the things that I'm saying? And what does it mean for me to love you if you're in a very different set of circumstances to me? Sometimes we might be tempted to think that we have to agree with someone in order to love them. For example, if your friend comes to you and they're upset because they've fallen out with their colleague, do you have to agree with their perspective to be a supportive friend and to love them through that difficult time? Or are you also allowed to challenge them and suggest that their behaviour might be part of the problem? Is it possible for a Labour voter to love a Conservative voter? In the end, if we're only able to love those that we agree with, then this reduces love to like-mindedness. I'm not sure that's a great definition of love. Perhaps then to love is to affirm. The language of being affirming is used a lot at the moment, with churches defining themselves as being affirming churches or non-affirming churches. And sometimes this is associated with whether those churches are loving or not. So perhaps to love means to affirm. Well, if by affirm we mean affirm someone else's views and opinions, really we're just back to agreeing again. But maybe that's not what affirming means. Maybe being affirming is about being positive and enthusiastic about your choices and your actions, whether or not I agree with you. If that's what affirming means, then this means embracing a relativist worldview where you make the choices that you want to make, and whether or not I agree with them, I affirm them as being equally right and true. Love, then, is either like-mindedness, or we have to accept that everybody's beliefs are equally true. This seems to me a very thin, weak version of what love is. Maybe to be loving is to be accepting of someone. This could mean two things. Accepting can mean just facing up to reality as it is. But is this all that love is? It may mean that accepting is to agree with their beliefs and their actions, to accept these as good. In the latter case, we're just back to agreeing or affirming, really. Clearly, accepting is part of what love encompasses in the first sense. We can only love the real person who is there in front of us. But is this all that love is? Agreeing, affirming, accepting, all these versions of love leave massive gaps. What do I do with the people who disagree with me? The people who hurt me? Is it even possible to think about loving those who are my enemies? So where would we go to get a better definition of love? Well, for Christians, love is defined for us in the Bible. Perhaps the most famous Bible verse of all is John 3:16, which says, "For God so loved the world that he gave his only Son, that whoever believes in him shall not perish, but shall have eternal life." Now, when God loved the world, did he agree with the world? Clearly not. The love of God in this case was a despite love. It's a love that reaches across disagreement. It's a love that comes to us not because we're lovely, but in order to make us lovely. This is a love that can coexist with making judgments about what is right and wrong, what is good and bad. Another important verse is 1 John 3:16, which starts, "This is how we know what love is, that Jesus died for us, and in the same way we ought to lay our lives down for the brothers and sisters." This verse is the Christian's definition of love. To love is to will the good of the other person and to be willing to sacrifice for their true good. But of course, their true good is defined by God, not by them and not by me. So to love me cannot mean just to agree with me or affirm my views, because my views may be wrong. For Christians, if we understand this, that we are the receivers of despite love, love that reaches across the divide, then we should not be surprised when we have to love those that we disagree with, that are different from us, those that we have to reach across all manner of obstacles to not only will their good, but to be willing to sacrifice for their good as well. Jesus himself said, even the world loved those who loved them. To imitate and to be changed by the love of God means to love those who don't love us, to love our enemies. So what does this mean? It means that if you're ever told that you can only really be loved by those that agree with you, or who affirm your choices, then you're being robbed of some of the richest and deepest love available to you. If love is reduced to affirming, then we're inevitably pulled apart because we can only be loved by those that agree with us. But the love of God has to move us beyond this, to a love that is, yes, more demanding, but is richer and deeper, and ultimately can lead us into life.